Jaguars have leadership, but I had a hard time finding who the 10 leaders are on the team, but it's not because they lack any. I'll tell you why I feel that way in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars, and we thank you for making us your first listen. My name is Tony Wiggins, the host of said podcast that you can find over on our YouTube page that is called Locked On Jaguars. Make sure you go over there, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I'm going to say it again, hit the like button. Also, hit that bell so that you receive a notification each and every time we drop an episode. We also drop on audio, so if you're riding your car, if you're sneaking at work, or wherever you are, and it doesn't allow you to watch, make sure you listen wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. That's right. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on, all one word, locked on, to get started. And shout out to the everydayers who get started with me every single day here on Locked On Jaguars. And you can be one. All you have to do is just join us every single day. Make sure if you see me in public, you scream out that you are an everydayer, so I will personally acknowledge you on the show. All right, we're going to get right down to it. Why leadership is important is where we'll land in segment 3. In the middle of the show, we're going to talk about the qualities of leadership that make me point out to the 10 guys that I have said, in my opinion, have the leadership baton, and they're going to have to run with it. And that is where we're going to start. The fact that the Jaguars have leaders. They actually have more than 10. I know it sounded like I was going to say I had a hard time picking the leaders of this team based on the fact that, well, in the past, it was hard to look beyond 1, 2, or 3 people and actually think that there was leadership. It appeared that everyone was trying to be leaders, but it also appears that everyone was looking around for other people to be leaders. Case in point, they last year were waiting for things to get better. You recall the retrospective look from guys like Trevor Lawrence and even Doug Peterson talked about guys were just trying to figure out, like, no one was being a bad teammate, but what everyone was sitting there doing was trying to let the magic that had happened the year before when they were so young and learning on the fly and they had all come together and things turned around at the end of the season. I think they were trying to let nature take its course. But I believe that they learned, and we all probably learned a little bit, that when you want to take a next critical step, somebody has to be proactive and grab that thing and say, let's go. And when the team full of young players starts to turn around and look at each other and just think that leadership is going to come knock on the door, no, you got to put your hard hat on and you have to actually go out and create those situations. Well, now I am a firm believer that they have leadership. In fact, I said I was going to pick 4 guys and I ended up picking 8, but then I realized I left 2 guys off. And then I thought about some more people, and there's like 4, 5, or 6 guys that I can think of. And I'm like, this is a good problem to have. The point is where you can't pick certain guys out. And what that signals to me is a certain level of buy-in. And I think when you hear Doug Peterson and he speaks on guys, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it sounds like the words that comes out of his mouth are coming from a coach that now believes that the players are taking ownership, that the players are leaders. Everyone that he talks about. And I did a podcast last week when he was talking about Mitch Morse and how Morse has come in and started to help all of the offensive linemen. And then I insinuated, and I kind of implied a little bit, and was like, wait, how could this new dude who just met these people come in here, and he's the same age as a former All-Pro, and he has just as much experience as a former All-Pro, but less, he hasn't been, he hasn't received the rewards or the pay or the notoriety of someone like Brandon Sheriff. How could that be? That he's adding something to this team that should have already been there. And that was me thinking and adapting to the fact that over the course of the last 2 decades, outside of the early Jaguars team and maybe 1 or 2 teams in between, for the most part, we have always said that they lacked leadership and they lacked culture. Remember those press conferences when Nick Foles got here and he was talking about culture and leadership and what it has to be? And then the following day, Doug Marrone comes into, and we're asking him about those comments, and he says, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. See, that's the attitude that led me to bring those questions up, because Doug Peterson got pissed, it sounded like to me. And anybody who was there in that room, you know that it probably seemed like he was saying, what the hell is he talking about? Doug had already been the head coach. So when you come in and you're talking about leadership and culture that doesn't exist and how you have to change things, you're basically looking right at the person that's responsible for that and saying you ain't been doing your job. So it was with that attitude that I brought it up. But what I have started to see now is what Doug truly meant. And what he meant was, in my opinion, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but for me, it sounds as if he's saying you can't have too much. Like, we have leadership in the building, but we went out and got more guys with leadership. Basically, it sounds as if Doug Peterson, Trent Baalke, and everyone else says we need the whole damn team to be leaders, and we need the whole team to take ownership. And it's not necessarily one voice, but what it is it's everybody. We need everybody on board. We need everybody pulling. We need everybody grabbing. We need everybody understanding that they can't go at it by themselves. And the more, the merrier. I'm starting to get that feeling, and this ain't a backtrack. That was a legitimate question, and this is a legitimate retort to that, because I'm hearing the leadership word come up with a lot of guys that Doug Peterson is describing when he's being asked, well, what about this player? Well, what about this player? So this is not an attempt to divide the team. This is not an attempt to, if I can steal something that's going on in the NBA, who's the best? Who's the best, Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum? Like, it don't matter. They're up 2-0. If they win a championship, ain't nobody going to care, right? This is more or less a tribute to those guys that I believe are leaders. And I'm going to describe the qualities of leadership. And it's not even going to really be a description about individual characteristics as much as it is about group expectation. I'm going to make sure I explain that. It's not necessarily about individual characteristics as much as it is about group expectation. And I'll use some analogies, as I always do, to explain that. And then I'm going to make sure we get to why those things are absolutely important and how they line up with winning. We're going to talk about those things here today as we continue on Locked On Jaguars. I'm going to name the 10 guys that I believe are the biggest leaders for the Jacksonville Jaguars and try to explain why. We'll do that here in segment 2 of Locked On Jaguars. First, I have to lead you by letting you know who our sponsor is for today, and that is FanDuel. And why am I doing that? Is because FanDuel is the absolute truth, and they are America's #1 sportsbook. A lot of things going on right now. You got the NHL, you got the NBA, you got baseball heating up, and teams really starting to make those moves and separate themselves in these divisions, right? And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right. Summertime means baseball, the NBA finals, and more. And you can get on the action with, if you're a new customer, you get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet at FanDuel. You can use it on everything from the finals MVP and who's going to hit one out of the park. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. Remember, right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. All right, checking back in here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. We're going to get down to it and start naming players. Going to name players. But first, one of my criteria for this is, all right, let me do the cliche stuff. always shows up to work on time, first guy in the building, last guy to leave, the most accountable person, will stand up and win and in defeat, and victory and in defeat, and accept responsibility for playing better even when their play wasn't the reason why the team lost. All right. Being always being available, being Johnny on the spot for your teammates, and just being an all-out good guy in the community. All right, you got all of that stuff. There ain't none of that stuff. None of those adjectives are what I'm talking about with leadership. You know what leadership is? Point blank. The example, I'll give you 2 examples. I noticed my grandson, every time he does something new. We took him to the beach for the first time on his the day after his birthday. And I had the honor and the pleasure of taking him to the ankle high water portion of the beach. I carried him. He kept looking at me. And finally, I went to put him down and he grabbed my shirt and he lifted his feet up like, no. Now, we know he likes water because he's been in the pool. And when he takes a bath, he's always turning the faucet on and putting his hands in the water. But he saw those waves coming up. And when I sat his feet down, he was afraid. And he looked around, not for me, he looked for his father. And as my son walked closer to me, he got approval that it was okay. He let my hands go. He smiled at his dad and he touched the water. And in sports, here's the thing. In sports, when things go right, when things go wrong, or when things are unfamiliar, people will turn and look to the person that they know, that they trust, and they believe will get them out of any situation. When we watch sports on TV, the first thing we do when things get tough is we wait for them to pan the camera to that guy. If Brady is on a team, or Montana or Jordan is on a team, right? And another team hits a shot and there's 3 seconds to go, and the team that they're on calls a timeout and they're going to get one more shot. What do you see? The camera goes right to them and that person is warming up. If the people know to put that camera on that person, and if fans clamor to have that person's face pop up on the screen because the first thing in their mind is do something, right? Don't you think the participants in these sports feel the same way? They do. But sometimes the team is leading with a minute to go and you depend on defense. And sometimes a team is losing with a minute to go and you depend on offense. So whoever leads in any given moment in a football game, because they don't play offense and defense, whatever that position is, everyone's going to turn and look at that guy and say, do something. Sometimes it's a pass rusher. Sometimes it's the center fielder and a safety, whether it was Ray Lewis or at linebacker or Ed Reed at safety. You're like, they're going to make a play. I know it's coming. Whether it's Aaron Donald in the Super Bowl against Joe Burrow, you know it's coming. Everyone on that team was looking for that player or certain players to get something done. And it's subconscious. So leadership is subconscious. You know what creates that situation? Precedent, work ethic, trust, believability, and understanding just who that. I've told the story so many times about me being in the locker room saying that the fans are calling a radio station telling they want Miles Jack to play. And then one player looked at me and said, who you going to take out? And I said, well, all the fans said pause. And I keep telling people, I was talking about Paul Posluszny. I had 3 or 4 players said, you out your mind. I mean, in unison, like the Temptations, it's almost as if they all just swooped in and was like, what did you say? That's leadership. Paz wasn't even there. He was around the corner. But leadership wasn't them looking at me like I was crazy, but leadership is what led to them to look at me like I was crazy. Because no matter what people outside of the building say, even the list that I'm about to give you now could very well be wrong. But I'm looking at, when things get tough, who do you turn to? Sometimes it's the player with the ball. Sometimes it's the player without the ball, but they lead. So we're going to get right to it. Foye Oluwakan. There ain't nothing else to be said. Listen to him. You see, I can't describe why I think Foye Oluwakan is one of the 10 best leaders on this team, other than the fact that he's led them in tackles for like 2 years, and he's been one of the best tacklers in the NFL for 3 years. It's not just stats. It's his aura. It's his presence. It's his availability. It's the way that he carries himself. And there's something to be said about that. And there's something to be said about it when you see it close up and in person, when you go to practices and you those guys pass by you walking to the field. There's a business atmosphere to Foye Oluwakan. Trevor Lawrence, that's number 2. This is not in order. We're just going down the list of guys, and maybe my subconscious made me write these names in a certain way. You see how that works? Trevor Lawrence, leader. I think he was pushed into some leadership positions that he had no business being into when it came to being a press secretary for all of that foolishness that was going on when he got here. But I do think he has taken it and run with it, especially when you consider there is so much polarization and discourse when people discuss whether or not he is a leader or not. For someone who deals with that on a daily basis, Trevor Lawrence handles that stuff as good as anybody. I am almost afraid what it would be like if Trevor Lawrence has sustained success and getting the Jaguars into the playoffs, making deep runs over and over again. He is as calm and as cool as you could ever imagine someone would be under the pressure of the microphone and the microscope of the camera, that those guys really still have a tendency to lean and turn to him. I know a lot of people around the league that say they keep hearing that Trevor Lawrence isn't there. I guarantee you ain't heard that from one of his teammates, even the guys that have left here. No one has ever said a bad thing about Trevor Lawrence. Josh Allen leads by example on and off the field in terms of how he prepares. He leads so well, in fact, the coaches don't even complain. In fact, they applaud him for doing whatever he does on his own time with these involuntary workouts. You ask them about Josh not being there, and the whole thing you get, they're going to give you a whole paragraph of coach speak, but I'll just put it all in a nutshell right now, what they say about him. We ain't worried about him. That's pretty much a microcosm. That little thing, ain't nobody worried about him. He's fine. That is how they feel about him. It's not what they say, but it's what comes out of their mouth indirectly. All right. Josh Allen is a really, really good model example of a guy that you pay to keep around in your franchise for a long time, whether it's on the field, off the field, or a combination of all of it. And Brandon Sheriff, the point that I was making about Mitch Morse is I saw Brandon Sheriff doing everything that they say Mitch Morse has done that I haven't seen him do yet, because I haven't been around there when this happens. I've seen him do it. When they had those practices at training camp, when the Miller Electric Center was being built this past season, right before the 22 season, when they were over at the high school and we were all over. It was a nice little setup, by the way. All you saw every single day was Brandon Sheriff. And he was with Cam Robinson, and he was with Jawan Taylor, and he was with all of these guys, pointing, coaching, talking. And I heard him just over and over again. So it has been there. But now, if you got Mitch Morse doing it too, now it's going to really, really add to the fact that the more, the merrier when it comes to that. So those are the first 5 I've named. It doesn't mean that they're 1 through 5, but Foye Oluwakan, Trevor Lawrence, Brandon Sheriff, Josh Allen, Mitch Morse. I'm going to get to the other 5, and I'm going to tell you, it's going to be some surprises and shocks in there a little bit. But I'm telling you, this is the way I feel without getting people to tell me this. How do I feel? Who am I going to look to? Who are the guys that I'm going to look to as the leaders? And I'll tell you more about it. But I have to tell you about Locked On Sports today. They've launched the first ever, that's right, the first ever national free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming that you see on ESPN and Fox all day. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's going to be more here of your team every day in just a minute here as we get to segment 3, talking leadership on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Don't go nowhere, man. Hang tough. All right, third and final segment here of Locked On Jaguars. So far, we've discussed the Jaguars, the fact that they have leaders, almost so many of them, you can't name them all without leaving somebody out. Some of those qualities of leadership might have been a little bit what you thought was different than all of the coach speak stuff and all of it's political season, man. You know, everybody's holding a hand like this, talking about leader. And okay, but we're going to talk about who you really feel and think can get you out of a tough spot as a fan, and maybe this is what the teammates expect as well. But I'm going to tell you why it's important after I name these last 5 people. New people and old people. There's going to be a mix here. There's one new guy I'm going to add. We already added Mitch Morse, who's new, but we're going to bring in Eric Armstead. You can already see it. You can already feel it. And a lot of people I know, including myself, are saying, "Ooh, this feels like CC Calais Campbell." Not only are they built alike and have sort of the same stature and can be used similarly, whether it's a 3-4-4-3, big end, 3 technique, 2 gap, whatever, they also have an aura about them, an on and off the field aura. And I love the fact that they are now combining that with him and Josh Allen and somebody else that I'm going to mention here in a minute, and knowing that that kind of leadership and accountability is what is in front of Foye Oluwakan is going to allow him to flow to the ball. I always look at defense in particular as having a guy on every single level that can make an impact, not only a play on the team, but be that guy on the defense at those levels. And this is all about communication. Communication ain't about somebody speaking a certain way. Communication is about people who are willing to listen to that person that's speaking that certain way. And I think these guys all have the credibility to make people listen. And that's why I'm putting Eric Armstead in there as well. He's been very, very complimentary of the other really, really good leaders on the team. One in particular is Trayvon Walker, and he's on this list too. And I have him as not in order, but as the 7th player that I'm going to mention. And part of his leadership comes from and totally stems from the aura and the way and the mannerism that he goes about his business. You ain't going to find anybody that works harder. You're not going to find anybody that is humble. He's the type of dude that if he stands in a certain spot, you want to walk up there and speak to him first. But guess what he's going to do? He's going to see you and he's going to speak to you, right? Trayvon Walker walks around like a dude that ain't afraid of nothing, who knows exactly who he is. You ain't going to push him off his square, and he ain't trying to push you off yours. He's not a threat, but he can't be threatened. That is leadership to me, and it's not necessarily the most vocal, but it is sometimes the most visible, and I think Trayvon Walker falls into that category. How about Christian Kirk? Aside from complaining about, not really complaining, but saying in week 2 that we had to get out of here and get out of town, because I thought that I bragged on him for that more than a few times here on this podcast. I do believe people should get the kind of grace where they just learn, right? And I think there are certain things you can't always say exactly what you're feeling, because it made it sound like he was trying to get out of Jacksonville, like there was some kind of distractions here in Jacksonville, Florida, or in the facility. I don't know. They said they used to have rats and stuff over in the old locker room. Maybe that was it. I don't know. But they weren't in the old locker room when he said that. So my thing is aside from those 1 or 2 things, I think the best thing that Christian has done is be really, really good on the field and worked his butt off to get back onto the field once he got injured last year and never made any excuses. He came in here with a lot of pressure because people said he was overpaid and that he reset the wide receiver mark and money-wise, and he wasn't worth all of that. And he has only proven in the last 2 years that not only was he worth the money, but he was actually worth probably a little bit more than that. And I just like the fact of they draft a wide receiver, they sign another wide receiver, and Christian Kirk is still Christian Kirk. And I think he is one of those players that gets it and realizes that he can get his, but other people can get theirs, and it doesn't affect him from getting his. And I think his ultimate goal, the feeling I get, is that he wants to win. Evan Ingram being here, being present, even when the team was struggling last year, he was the one guy who statistically was doing well, and you didn't see any finger pointing. He's always been accountable for anything he's done that did not lead to success, with a couple of drops here and there. He never ran away from anything. And I think he's a hard worker. You can look at him and tell. Evan Ingram already was rocked up. And what I mean by rocked up is always in super, super great conditioning. But it seems like every time I see him, his conditioning actually even improves, and his physique even actually improves. And the thing is, he always has a smile on his face, and he's a good dude. And he's one of those guys that eat, sleep, and drink, getting prepared to play these games. That's number 9. I'm going to get to number 10. Andre Cisco. Look, everyone knows last year I picked Andre Cisco to be one of the better safeties in the league. Got derailed a little bit because he got a little bit banged up. Cisco is a dude. I only worry about him because he plays sort of Ryan Clark-ish, even though he's probably a little more rangy than Ryan Clark played when Ryan Clark, shout out to the Pivot Podcast and Ryan Clark. I think there's a reckless abandon about him where he plays a certain way. He is immensely talented. He's a little bit over 6 feet, probably 6'1". Now, here's where you have to be concerned. He's yoked, man. The dude has thighs. The dude is very, very muscular. I used to see Fred Taylor was like that when he first started, and then he would get the little pulls and stuff until he was able to, I think he changed his diet a little bit, and then he was able to train a little bit. And then Fred went and never, hardly ever was injured anyway. Cisco has to stay on the field, but I don't think it's because of a lack of conditioning. I almost think he might be over-conditioned a little bit, and I also think he plays hard and he covers a lot of ground and he plays 150 miles per hour when he's on the field. I just want him to stay healthy. I want him to be able to manage that a little bit. And you ain't got to give away so much of your body, man, because we actually need your body on the field. But he's vocal. And I also think that people that play with him, they know that 5 has him covered in the back. And I think that's what leadership is, knowing that your teammate has you covered, even when it's a difficult situation, believing that he's going to make a play. You can't tell me you can't remember plays that Andre Cisco has made. He's like, whoa, how did he do that? Whether it be interceptions, diving interceptions, hitting balls at the last second. He tackles guys that get open in the open field. Those are the guys that I believe represent the current leadership of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And get this, I'm going to say this, and a lot of people are going to be like, I can't believe Wig said that. I think this is a strength of this team, and I'm very, very happy with the young men that they have decided that are going. Well, not necessarily decided. They're very happy with the young men that I mentioned and others that have taken the mantra of leadership and are the face of this franchise. You all should be proud too, man. These are some good football players who have gotten their money for the most part or are going to get their money, but they still represent what moving forward for this organization is all about. And it is one of those things in the foundation. And when you start talking about culture and you start talking about all of these other words that people either use to describe or gaslight a fan base, they don't lack that. They have football character and they're talented as well. You need to take a bow, man, and look forward to these guys leading this team for the rest of the season. The same way I lead the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where it's your team every single day here on Locked On. Make sure you check out the first national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. And I'm available every day here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. As always, I thank you for making me your first listen. And until next time, please take care of each other. And I will see you on the next episode.